She teleported into my room every night and leaves her scent behind. The nights were always quiet in the small apartment. It was a cozy space, tucked away on a side street, perfect for someone who enjoyed peace and solitude. The man had lived there for years, enjoying his own company and his routine. He wasn't one for late-night parties or constant socializing. After a long day at work, he would return to his apartment, make a simple meal, and spend the evening in front of his favorite TV shows or reading a book. His life was comfortable, predictable, but for the last few weeks, something strange had been happening. It wasn't immediately obvious, but it started with small details that he couldn't ignore. Every night, around the same time, just as he was getting ready for bed, he began to notice a faint scent in the air. At first, he thought it was coming from outside or perhaps from the neighbor's apartment, but the scent was so distinct that he couldn't shake the feeling that it was coming from within his own room. It was soft and floral, like lavender mixed with something warm, like fresh bread. At first, he brushed it off. Perhaps he was just imagining things, or maybe it was the scent of some air freshener in the hallway. But the next night, it was there again. And the night after that. The scent wasn't overwhelming, but it was definitely noticeable, and it always filled the room just before he went to sleep. One evening, as he sat reading his book on the couch, he felt a sudden chill in the air. He looked around, puzzled. The window was closed, and the heating was on. There was no reason for the temperature to drop. But there it was, this unexpected cold breeze, just for a moment, followed by that same mysterious scent. He set the book down, his mind racing. It wasn't just the scent anymore. There was something about the way the air felt, as if someone else was there, standing just out of view. He stood up and moved toward the corner of the room, but the coldness faded away as quickly as it had appeared. It was like a passing moment, leaving him to question whether he had imagined it all. The following nights were more of the same. The scent would return, the air would feel a little cooler, and that same strange feeling of being watched would wash over him. He told himself it was nothing, just his imagination playing tricks on him. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening, something that couldn't be explained so easily. One night, he decided he would stay awake, determined to figure out what was going on. Well, he turned off the lights, pulled the covers over himself, and settled in. His eyes focused on the corner of the room where he felt the most presence. The clock on the wall ticked quietly, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent room. He waited, his heart beating a little faster than usual. It didn't take long before the familiar scent filled the air again. But this time, it was stronger. The man sat up quickly, looking around. He could have sworn he saw a flicker of light in the corner of the room, like a shadow shifting, but when he looked directly at it, nothing was there. The scent lingered for a few moments before slowly fading away. His mind was racing now. There had to be some explanation for this. It was too real to be a dream, too consistent to be a coincidence. Was it his imagination? Or was something, or someone, coming into his room every night? The strange occurrences didn't stop. If anything, they became more intense as the days passed. The man couldn't explain it, but every night, like clockwork, the same pattern would unfold. He'd sit in his chair, reading or watching TV, and as the clock struck midnight, he'd feel the familiar chill in the air. Then the scent would fill the room. A soft, comforting fragrance that was always there, lingering just enough to make him notice. It wasn't just the scent anymore, though. There was a presence, something in the room that he couldn't see, but could almost feel. The air seemed to shift as if someone else was moving around, standing just out of view. It was the kind of feeling you get when you're sure someone is watching you, even though there's no one there. The man tried to ignore it. He told himself that it was just his mind playing tricks on him, that he was overthinking everything. But when the phenomenon kept repeating itself, he couldn't deny it anymore. He wasn't imagining it. Something was happening. One night, As he sat on his bed reading a book before sleep, the scent returned stronger than ever. This time, it didn't fade away. It seemed to linger in the room, growing more and more powerful as the minutes passed. He stood up, his heart racing, and took a few steps toward the source of the scent. As he walked, he felt the air grow colder, the hairs on his neck standing up. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but when he reached the spot in the corner of the room where the scent was the strongest, he froze. There, in the dim light, he saw something. It wasn't clear at first, just a shadow, but it was definitely there, standing as if it had been waiting for him. The man's heart pounded in his chest. He took a step forward, his mind racing. Was it a person? Was he imagining things? For a moment, nothing happened. The shadow just stood there, unmoving. Then, as if sensing his hesitation, the figure slowly faded away, leaving the room eerily silent again. The scent remained, though, lingering in the air long after the shadow had disappeared. The man stood there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process what had just happened. His mind was spinning, his logical side telling him it was all just a figment of his imagination, a trick of the mind. But his heart told him something different. Something real had just occurred in that room, something that couldn't be explained. He returned to his bed, but sleep didn't come easily that night. His thoughts raced. What was going on? Was he being haunted? Or was this something else entirely, something beyond the world he knew? For the next few nights, the man couldn't bring himself to stay in the room long enough to figure out what was happening. The scent, the cold air, the figure. It was all too much to process. He tried to avoid the room altogether, spending his time in the living room or even outside. But every night when he returned to his apartment, the same thing would happen. The scent would fill the air, and that strange presence would return. He couldn't explain it. He didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying what he was experiencing. It was as if someone, or something, was visiting him every night. Someone who had a presence in the room, but couldn't be seen. And no matter what he did, he couldn't escape it. As the days passed, the man's obsession with the strange occurrences in his room grew. Every time he returned home, he found himself wondering if it would happen again. The scent, the chill in the air, the shadow. He had started to accept that these things were beyond his understanding. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it all. The strange presence felt more like a person than some random occurrence, and he began to wonder if it was trying to communicate with him in some way. One evening, as he sat in his favorite chair reading a book, the clock struck midnight. It was the usual time when the strange events would start. He noticed the air growing colder, the scent beginning to fill the room. But this time, something was different. He didn't feel as scared as he had before. Instead, there was a strange sense of calm, almost as if he had come to accept whatever was happening. He stood up slowly, his eyes scanning the room. The flicker of light appeared again, just in the corner of his vision, but when he turned to face it directly, nothing was there. It wasn't a bright light, just a dim flicker, like a shadow moving in the periphery. But this time he didn't immediately turn away. He stayed still, waiting. The scent grew stronger, and for the first time the man closed his eyes and took a deep breath. It was comforting. There was something familiar about it, something he couldn't quite place. It wasn't just a random smell. It was like it was meant for him, as if it were a message. He exhaled slowly, trying to push away his fear and embrace whatever was happening. He had no idea why it was happening, but it was undeniable now. Something, someone, was visiting him every night. After a few moments, he felt the temperature in the room drop even further, and a shiver ran down his spine. But he wasn't frightened this time. He didn't know why, but he felt drawn to whatever it was. The presence in the room wasn't threatening. It wasn't something to be afraid of. It was just there, and for some reason, he felt connected to it. He stepped toward the corner of the room where the flickering light had been. The air felt different there, colder, but in a way that wasn't uncomfortable. It was almost as if the room itself was alive, breathing with him. The scent filled his nostrils again, stronger now, and he closed his eyes for a moment, letting it wash over him. Then, as if by instinct, he whispered softly, "Are you there?" For a moment, everything went still. The scent lingered, the cold air remained, but there was no movement, no flicker of light, no sound, nothing. He opened his eyes and looked around, unsure of what he had expected. But then, just as quickly as it had stopped, the presence returned. It wasn't in the form of a figure, but the air seemed to shift, the chill deepening, the scent lingering even stronger. He stood there for a long time, waiting. What was he waiting for? He didn't know, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. He had never felt so connected to something or someone he couldn't see. It was strange, yes, but it didn't feel wrong. As he finally returned to his bed that night, the scent stayed with him. It wasn't overwhelming, but it lingered in the room, comforting him as he drifted off to sleep. He knew this wasn't a dream. It was real. And the more it happened, the more he began to feel that the presence, the scent, the strange events, they weren't just random. There was a purpose behind it. But what? The next few days went by in a blur for the man. He couldn't focus on anything else. The events in his room had taken over his thoughts. Every time he left for work, he found himself wondering what would happen when he returned. Would the presence be there again? Would the scent fill the air? The chill sweep through the room? He had no answers, but the questions kept coming. Each night, without fail, the strange events would unfold. The cold air, the scent, the flickering light in the corner of the room. It became a nightly ritual. He started to feel like he knew exactly when it would happen. And every time, the sensation grew stronger. It was almost as if he was expecting it now, like he had come to understand that it was part of his life. It didn't make sense, but he didn't need it to. What mattered was that it was real, and it was happening to him. One evening, as the night settled in, the man decided to do something different. He had been watching the clock for days, waiting for midnight to approach. But tonight, he wasn't going to wait for the phenomenon to happen on its own. He wanted to confront it, to understand it. He sat in the chair near the corner of the room, the place where the flickering light often appeared. He had his eyes closed, trying to relax, trying to connect with whatever was there. He didn't know if this was the right thing to do, but his instincts told him that he needed to make an active effort to understand. So he sat there in silence, letting the room become still. Minutes passed, and just as the clock struck midnight, he felt it again. The air grew cold. The scent filled the room. It was the same scent, the same lavender-like fragrance, now mixed with something softer, like a hint of honey or something sweet. The flicker of light appeared in the corner of his vision, just as it always did. He didn't move this time. He stayed still, waiting. The cold deepened, and the scent grew stronger. He took a deep breath, not out of fear, but out of a strange sense of anticipation. He had done it before, just standing there and waiting for the presence to come to him. But tonight felt different. It felt more intense, like something was about to happen. He opened his eyes slowly, staring into the corner of the room where he had often felt the presence. The flickering light was gone now, but the chill remained. The scent was still there, and it seemed to fill the room in a way it never had before. This time, though, he felt something else. It wasn't just a sensation of being watched anymore. It felt like connection. He stood up slowly, taking a deep breath as he walked toward the corner. For the first time, he didn't feel fear. Instead, there was a sense of calm. The air seemed to thicken around him, as if the room itself were alive, waiting. He reached out his hand slowly, almost without thinking. The temperature dropped even further, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He felt the cold brush against his skin, and the scent filled his nose again, more intense than ever. And then, in that moment, he swore he felt something brush against his fingertips. A soft, almost imperceptible touch, like a whisper in the air. But it was enough. He had made contact. The room seemed to shift. The chill remained. But the presence, the sensation of being watched, was different now. It was no longer something to fear. It was as if the room had accepted him, as if whatever had been visiting him every night had finally connected with him in some way. He stepped back slowly, his heart still racing. But this time it wasn't out of fear. It was a strange sense of peace. He didn't know what had happened, but he knew it wasn't just a dream. Something, someone, was out there, and they had finally acknowledged him. He returned to his bed that night, the scent still lingering in the air. For the first time, he didn't feel alone in his room. Whatever had been coming to him every night had left a mark. It wasn't just a visitation anymore. It was something deeper, something more meaningful. And even though he didn't understand it, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't the same as he had been before. The connection was real, and it was just beginning. As the days turned into weeks, the man found himself caught in a strange, almost hypnotic rhythm. Every night he would return home and wait for the same sequence of events to unfold. The cold air, the soothing scent, the faint flicker of light in the corner. The presence in the room became a constant part of his life, something he had come to expect and, in a way, even look forward to. It was as if the two of them were in a silent agreement, coexisting in the same space without needing to understand the full extent of what was happening. But as time went on, the man began to realize something deeper was at play. The connection between him and the mysterious presence wasn't just about the scent or the chill, or even the occasional flicker of light. It was something more subtle, more profound. There were nights when he could almost feel the presence of the entity without any of the usual signs. The air in the room would shift, the temperature would drop, and he would sense that someone was near, though he could never see them. At first, he didn't know how to react to this. It was different from the earlier encounters, when he was simply a passive observer of the strange happenings. Now, he felt like he was part of it. The presence wasn't just visiting anymore. It was sharing something with him. A presence that was more than just an unexplained phenomenon. One evening, as the man sat on the edge of his bed, contemplating all that had happened, he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. It wasn't fear or confusion, but something deeper. It was as if the presence in his room had become a part of his own life, a silent companion who understood him in a way no one else ever had. He felt the connection more strongly than ever before, as if they shared a bond that went beyond the physical. There was no explanation for it, just a strange, undeniable sense of familiarity. That night, as he lay down to sleep, the usual chill filled the room. The scent, though faint, lingered in the air, but something was different. This time, it wasn't just a fleeting sensation. The presence, as if in response to his quiet thoughts, seemed to surround him. It wasn't something he could see or touch, but it was there, filling the space with a warmth that contrasted the cold air. He closed his eyes, trying to absorb the feeling, and for the first time, he felt completely at peace. Sleep came easily that night, but it wasn't the same as before. There were no strange dreams or unsettling feelings. Instead, he dreamt of calm, peaceful landscapes, wide-open fields, rolling hills, and skies that stretched on forever. It was the kind of dream that left him feeling rested and serene, as though he had traveled to a place far away from the noise of the world. And when he woke up, it was as if the presence had been with him all along, even in his dreams. The following nights were much like that one, peaceful, almost tranquil. The presence no longer felt like a mystery to be solved, or a phenomenon to be feared. It felt like a part of his world now, something that had been there from the beginning, just waiting for him to recognize it. He no longer tried to understand what was happening. He didn't need to know the why or the how. All that mattered was that the connection was real, and it brought him a sense of comfort that he had never known before. One night, As he sat in the chair by the window, looking out at the stars, he realized that the presence had never truly been about fear or confusion. It had always been about something deeper, a connection to something beyond himself, something that existed in the quiet spaces between moments, the scent, the chill, the faint light. They were all just signals, reminders that he was not alone in this world. And for once he felt a sense of belonging, a sense of peace that he had never experienced before. It was in that moment that the man truly understood. The presence wasn't there to haunt him or scare him. It wasn't a ghost or an apparition. It was simply a companion, a guide, perhaps even a friend. And while he would never fully understand the nature of their connection, he had come to accept it, to embrace it, as part of his life. The visits would continue as they always had, but now he no longer feared them. They had become a part of his nightly routine, a reminder that sometimes the most profound connections come when you least expect them. As the months passed, the visits became more subtle, almost imperceptible. The air would still grow cold at times, and the scent would fill the room, but now it was less frequent, as if the presence had quietly receded into the background of his life. The man didn't mind. In fact, he appreciated it. The connection had been made, and while it might not have been the kind of relationship he had once imagined, it was real, and that was enough for him. He no longer sought out the presence, no longer waited for it to appear. Instead, he simply went about his life, knowing that it was there, somewhere in the quiet spaces of his room, waiting. Sometimes when the scent would return, he would close his eyes, breathe deeply, and remember the feeling of peace it had brought him. And so, life went on. The man lived his days, his thoughts always drifting back to those quiet nights when the presence would fill the room with its calming energy. He knew that no matter where life took him, he would always carry with him the memory of those strange, beautiful visits and the sense of connection they had brought into his life. The mysterious visits had come to an end, but the impact they had on him would last forever. There was no need to understand the reason behind it all. It was enough to know that sometimes the most extraordinary experiences don't need explanations. They simply need to be felt, and he had felt it deeply, and that was all that mattered.